Talk TV. I am your host, Jose Luis Jimenez.
I'm Ruby Lopez.
And I'm Greg Compian.
You're watching us live here in the wonderful Houston Media Source studios here in the east end of Houston, Texas. If you've ever thought about producing your own TV show, if you think you can do a better job than us, come on in, set up your own show up, and become part of Houston Media Source, okay? So there's a plug for Houston Media Source. Anyways, so here we go. We're going to first talk about what's going on in the community. Guys, y'all got any good current events out there?
Ruby.
Oh, come on now.
I wanted to talk about the fish that died in Galveston, but apparently this happens all the time.
Well, if y'all don't know this, she's from where? Dubai?
I came from Dubai.
But she grew up
I
in the
grew up
Milby
here.
area, so you're from here. Anything else?
No.
Okay, I got to go in. Since Ben Mendez is missing tonight, he actually had to work too much. And because it is live TV, he had to sleep. I've got a good one. If y'all don't know, here in the United States, if you're a dreamer, you're within the ages of 16 and 30, you're either graduate from high school or get your GED or actually go to college, you're now may have the right to work. And that's through an application process. But there's been some issues in Arizona. The state governor over there said, well, I don't care if they have the right to work. They're not going to be able to, they're not going to have the right to drive. And here in the state of Texas, the situation is the same. If you don't have a Social Security card or Social Security number, you cannot get your driver's license. So what do you think is going to have an impact here in Texas? Think that's going to be an issue?
It's kind of early to tell, but I think that you still got to keep on the fight. There's always going to be opposition in anything you do, but you got to look at really what the bigger cause is and keep your eye on the prize and keep fighting.
What do you
This
think?
is for ages between 13 and 17?
No, it's 16 to 30.
Oh, 16.
Yeah, they'll have the right to work. A lot of the dreamers are already college graduated, might even have master's and doctorate degrees. They just don't have the right to work.
They don't have the right to drive.
No, right now they don't have the right to work, nor do they have the right to drive.
Right, and they're going to give them the right to work.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's a double-ended sword, right? I mean, you can work, but you can't drive. I don't get that. It's going to be difficult for some people to get to work. How are they going to get there? I think they should give them both. If you're going to give them the right to work, give them the right to drive as well.
Well, we give them the right to buy a car. We give them the right to buy insurance. Why can't we give them the right to drive?
So you're telling me these millions of people aren't driving right now? Come on.
No,
I mean,
they
it's
just
just it's a roadblock.
Yeah, I think it's just
It's
politics.
a hump in the road.
They're
I
driving
think
uninsured, and they're
no,
causing
that
problems as
may
well.
not
Well,
be.
no, they might have insurance. They just don't have a
they're
driver's
just driving
license.
illegally then.
No, they just don't have a driver's license.
Yeah, which
So.
is not good.
Okay. Did y'all hear about the granny who stabbed that intruder at the house?
Why did they have to say gangsta granny? What is all that about?
I know. I actually
I don't
thought that was
understand
kind of a racist thing to say.
I
Why she
would
gotta
say
be a
whoop
gangster
your
granny?
butt granny or something
You
like
know,
that.
right?
But gangsta granny?
No, she would have been Mexican. What do you call it? La chanclazo? What do you mean? Come on now.
I don't understand that. But yeah, I tell you what, it was a good story though. I like how she took that approach and she was like, the word to get out that nobody else is coming in this house.
She charged him
She
at the
did
door.
what she had to protect herself.
That was good.
I wish more people were like that. But at the same time, she took a lot of risk.
She did.
That was a very gutsy thing to do. The same thing, y'all don't know, but there was an actual bomb threat going from a plane from El Paso to Houston. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and I think that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss back to school. We have some very interesting guests. We're intentionally going to ask questions, and if you're watching, please call in a little bit. You'll be part of the show. Ask them whatever you have to ask them, okay? But we're going to talk about what is going back to school, what you have to do to be a better parent, better guest, a better friend, how to support your local schools, and find out what's really going on to help the kids get even better and become more successful, okay? So you're watching Latino Talk TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Latino Talk TV. You are here watching us live in Houston, Texas. Now we have two very special guests here to talk to us about going back to school and what you need to do to become more prepared. So first, let's welcome Tanisha Williams. Hi, Tanisha.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. You're the manager at Teach for America?
A manager of teacher leadership development.
Wow, fancy title. Okay.
All right.
Now we have Erica Garza, a school counselor.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, first and foremost, any tips for the parents on what they need to do going back to school now? What's different?
I would definitely say build relationships with teachers. A lot of times parents they find it difficult to build and forge those relationships with teachers, but I definitely think that it's key to student success, as you were saying earlier. So
Do you feel that it's easier to build relationships with parents that are working parents, maybe via email or other ways to communicate instead of coming to the classroom?
Definitely. Most parents do want to contact through email. So that's how most parents want to. Sometimes they even ask if you have a teacher Facebook page or if you can just send them a text message. They're very hesitant about having, like, a sit down with you, so they want things quick because a lot of parents do work.
How does the social media play into, are people adapting to it, or in this time and day would you say that it is an issue that people don't have access to internet or emails, or that's kind of really silly to think that?
yeah, I definitely think social media is extremely important these days. But you're right, a lot of people don't have that access. So I don't mind text messages, regular phone calls, taking it back. So either way, any way to communicate with the parents.
But don't you think that's kind of a modern day cop out? I mean, isn't that the problem that's happening today? That parents aren't involved in their kids' education. I mean, they're that disconnected from the kids at home. They just pretty much lock them up and put an iPad in front of them. Don't you think they're doing the same thing with teachers?
I honestly think some parents just don't know how to build those relationships. So I think it's the teacher's responsibility to make sure that we go out and actively try to build those relationships with parents to inform them of what it takes to make sure that their students are successful.
We just have to follow through. And like you were saying, it's a double-edged sword because you have your parents that are very, very adaptable to it and they want to go that route, the technology route, and then you have other parents who don't have internet at home. So you really do need to build those relationships and kind of fit the needs of the parents. Have your list of parents that you can communicate through technology, and then have your other list of parents that you're going to have to make a phone call, or do other means. So it's just about knowing your parents and having that communication.
So do you have to know the parents, or do you have to know the kids, or can you read the parents from the kids?
I think you have to know both. In order to really build relationships, you have to know. I think a lot of times we think that we just need to know the students, but there's a lot of things that go on at home that we may not know about. So having the relationship with both of them is just as important.
Okay, so building the relationship is really important, a big step for now that you're starting school. What's something else, another way to prepare to get your kids prepared for the school year?
Definitely just read, have your children read, and just communicate with your children and have routines set in place, like bedtimes and breakfast, and just have procedures and consequences, because I think what's going on is that these kids are just not developing good habits at home, and so they're bringing those bad habits to school, and it's just really hard for teachers to try to, do two jobs in one.
So this week being the last week before school starts, it would be a good opportunity to kind of implement some of these new practices, if you would. But what if the 12-year-old says, it's the last week of summer. Come on, Ma. I want to stay up and watch Family Guy. What do you do then?
I mean, I think that a lot of that is the parent. Make sure that you stay consistent. If you want your child to go to bed at 8 o'clock, tell them to get in bed at 8 o'clock.
So you got to be a parent, not a friend.
Well, wait a minute. How are you a parent? What is a good parent?
I mean, it depends on who's.
I think a
whose
good
eyes you're
parent
looking
should
through.
want their child to be successful.
Okay.
And so getting 3 hours of sleep a night is not going to make your child successful the next day at school.
That's right.
And so that's just, your child needs adequate sleep, adequate nutrition. They just need to, you don't need to be a Nazi type of parent, because I know parents want to be friends and there's some type of stability, but you do need to have some kind of rules and consequences.
Okay. That's really what we got to get down to, because truth is, we let's call a spade a spade. I mean, it is what it is. There are a lot of parents who stay up with their kids partying with them. You get to high school level. Even when I was in high school a long time ago, there are parents who actually party with the kids. I mean, at what point does that start? Where do you start being a parent and not be a friend? Or how is that a good balance? I mean, any suggestions based on the teacher side? What can they do to help y'all become better teachers and then support them? 'Cause I think you hit the nail on the head. Sleep more than 3 hours, right? What else?
Definitely.
Have conversations with your kids. I think sometimes having those difficult conversations about school, or just asking simple questions like, what did you do in school today? Do you like school? Just figuring out your students' needs and their child's needs and what they need from school is another big one. So holding a conversation.
Why would you want to become a teacher, really? I mean, I think that's very important, very noble, the profession that you serve. And you hear about the pay and this and that. and for you to have that commitment, sacrifice, and like comments you made earlier about having 120 kids, why? I mean, are y'all a little bit crazy, or, I mean, no, really, really, what is it?
Why do you do it?
Yeah, why do you do it?
I always knew I wanted to be a teacher since I was little. I think since I was in 4th grade, I started saying I was going to be a teacher. And so there was no doubt in my mind. There was no hesitation when I went to college. I never had, a second guess. I just knew. I always liked school, and I was always a good student. And I think it was just having those relationships with good teachers along the way, having that positive role models, looking up to teachers. I can, name a few teachers that I remember today, just things they told me, the way they made me feel. And yeah, I just really wanted to kind of, be that positive role model to students and push them and for them to realize that education is really important.
So what's one of the things you remember from your teacher?
Well, when I was in 1st grade, I didn't know how to speak English, and so I almost failed the 1st grade. And it was because of one teacher and a lot of her volunteer time one-on-one that really kind of boosted my academics that year. And then by 3rd grade, I was in GT classes. And so it was that teacher that made the difference. That teacher just made the total difference of me being regular classes versus GT, me having that confidence, me learning 2 languages. She didn't give up on me. I remember her name, Miss Egusquizas.
Say that fast 3 times. That's a cool name.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I feel that I will never forget her because of her special name. And so.
And what she did for you.
And what she did for me, exactly.
Okay. You got one of those?
Yeah, Tanisha, you?
Yeah, I have one of those teachers. I think we all do. I initially didn't want to be a teacher. I come from a line of teachers doing some research about schools in low-income communities and felt like I, definitely coming from a low-income community, wanted to go back and teach in those schools. And so I think that was where I came from, why I wanted to teach and why I stay up those long and work those crazy hours. I do think being a teacher, you might be a little crazy, and I think that's good. I think it's good to be a little crazy. So, yeah, I had that 4th grade teacher who saw my potential and took it and ran with it.
So what did she do? Or he?
She sent a letter home to my mom and told her that I wasn't reaching my full potential. And I had never gotten a letter sent home, so it was a big deal for me. So that's what it was. That was like the turning point.
Wow.
An example of an involved parent. She read the letter and she responded.
She surely did. She responded.
That's good.
So y'all both had also, not only did y'all have some influential teachers, but you had some parents that were in y'all's business.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay, so that I think that's the part we have to kind of look at. I mean, do y'all have that experience too? One of those teachers?
Oh, yeah. I remember a teacher telling me if I knew what a C was, if I knew what an A was, and a C was the best of the worst, and an A was a C was the worst of the best, and A was the best of the worst, or something like that, or C. Oh, I made a C, I passed. She said, okay, you know what a C is? What is it? She said, it's the best of the worst and the worst of the best. And if you think about it, it is, And that really kind of makes you kind of want to buckle down and study and get with it. And I think that the kids and what you guys do, the service that you really give, and those relationships that kids take to, and we just saw, come in here and hug you, and that, that's important, and I think that's very rewarding for you guys, and so I take my hats off to all the teachers out there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise.
So you go?
I have a question, actually. Not to veer off a little bit off topic. Well, to talk about the teacher, there's this one teacher I really remember, my 7th grade English teacher. Every morning we came in, every week she would teach us how to say hello, a greeting in a different language, which I thought was really, really good. And to this day, I still remember a lot of the greetings. But what I wanted to ask was about security in the schools. I wanted to ask you your take on how you feel security in the schools is nowadays, especially with everything that's been going on.
Well, I personally think the school that I was at was very secure. I even felt like I kind of had bodyguards. Like, my students wouldn't let certain things happen. They would stay at the door until I walked out the door. They were just like that protective, that protective type of student. So I think a lot of that made me feel more secure because of building those relationships with my students. There are some schools where security is a big issue. I definitely think that having a HISD police on campus is a great way to go to ensure that security stays close-knit and tight.
The campus that I've always been at, I've always felt secured. We have fire drills in place, we have lockdowns, shelter in place. We have all those, and they're taught to us, they're trained. We go to special training, and we have emergency buckets, we have our emergency folder. So, our school's always really done staff development and training, and we know exactly what to do when an emergency arises. We've never had any emergencies, any type of security issue. We do have a police on campus as well. He has his own office. I do know that he kind of shuffles between 2 or 3 campuses, so he's at our campus maybe twice a week, 3 times a week. But even though the days that he's not on our campus, he comes and does a visit in the mornings and does, so we see him a lot. We see him in the hallways, and they do random checks with dogs during lunch, and the kids end up talking to the dog and hugging the dog and touching the dog. So I've always felt really secure.
So now, I want to talk about that real quick because that's become normal today. That's, we just talked about drug sniffing dogs, and that's something that's kind of happening. But before we go into that, the phone number is 281-846-5079. If you have any questions for our teachers and our guests, please call in and join us. But let's talk about the security of the campus, right? When we were in school, I don't remember, or in high school I do remember having drug sniffing dogs show up, but this was a big deal. But are you in the high school level?
I'm in the intermediate, but this happens maybe once or twice a year. And I'm not sure if it's really a drug check or just because the security officer that day has the dog and just can't leave it, outside or in the car or something. Because it's more of like a happy event in our school, like, oh, the dog's here. So I don't know if they do that kind of to sneak what they're trying to do or they try to cover it up. But the kids don't ever think like, oh, someone has drugs today, the dog's here. It's more just like, oh, he's visiting us.
Oh.
What about bullying? I mean, you hear a lot, especially last year with the bullying of kids and what have you, and maybe even some kids, unfortunately, taking their lives and what have you. So you're a third day as a counselor, as you said earlier. So do y'all recognize that in the classrooms, or you can see it, or just how do you? I mean, because you're more than a teacher.
Oh, yes.
Really? I mean,
Teacher, mother, sister.
Custodian, nurse, wherever any roles. We definitely see issues of bullying, but I can personally say that I feel that as every year progresses, students are more, they're more confident to come forward with bullying, whereas in the past maybe they weren't. Because I think now there's so much education and they are hearing so much of the word bullying, that they're more comfortable coming to you and talking about it. And I think more than anything, it's more cyberbullying now that's going on because the kids are smart enough to not do it in front of other people. So it's more of cyberbullying through Facebook, maybe a negative comment on a picture, or just, ridicule on Facebook or Twitter or text messages. That's where we are seeing more of the bullying now.
do you see kids at that level with cell phones already?
Yes.
Wow. What, 9 years old, 10 years old? And they're carrying a cell phone. Wow.
I think bullying, it comes in all forms, and it is very difficult to sometimes realize that bullying is going on. And it is difficult for a student to come forth and tell a teacher that they're being bullied for a variety of reasons. So I think as the teacher in the classroom and as the parent, make sure that your student feels comfortable going to you and telling you that they're being bullied or they're being talked about, because it does have the impact to the negativity to affect their work. So they won't do their work as good as they could be doing it because they're being bullied and all of these other things that go along with that. So making sure that you build that culture in the classroom to where they feel like they can come to you and let you know if someone's bullying them.
And now I'm going to play devil's advocate, but isn't there a point where you just tell the kid to toughen up? I mean, it's like...
Not in those words, maybe, but in other words, you could kind of give them that
this
message.
is a guy talking to me, but I mean, at what point do you stop the kid from being such a whiner?
Well, it depends on what you consider bullying, I think. So if they're being a whine, if someone is talking about them, then that's where you have those life lessons about you're growing up. This is how you begin to fix the problems that you may have. This is how you talk it out. This is what it sounds like. This is what it looks like. But if it's a continuous bullying or being pushed or being taunted every day, then that's when the student should definitely come and tell the teacher.
Yeah, we don't send them to the counselor's office for every little thing. We do try to teach them how to resolve their own conflicts.
Okay, so hit back. I'm messing with y'all.
That's how you brought up.
No,
I'm messing with y'all.
Right.
Sorry, the neighborhood's coming out of me. All right.
Keep it in. Keep it in.
No, I gotta keep it in. That's what we do here. We're gonna talk about the truth here, because truth is there's some parents that actually tell the kids to do that.
Right, and we have those discussions in class because I have had kids who have said, well, my mom always says to hit back, and within the classroom, that's not my rule.
That must be Gangster Granny's little grandchild right there.
My wife's always pointing at me. He's like, that's what you said. Hey, that's the way I was raised. It was like, hey, you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back.
I always tell my students, what, I technically can't tell you to hit them back, but, sometimes, your parents are telling you certain things. So, I mean, when they tell me my mom says this, I just keep quiet because I don't want to go back on what their parents said, especially in that case when some parents don't even talk to their children. Their parents are involved and are talking to their children. That kind of right there is a good sign for me that they've talked to their parents about it. So I just, yeah, but in my classroom, we can't condone them hitting each other.
Well, why is the focus, unfortunately, the focus is taken away from the students, from the teacher, from the needs, and it's all politicalized about funding and shortfalls and layoffs and teacher unions and it seems like everyone takes their eye off the prize, and the prize are the kids. And that's why the United States rankings across the world have just, what are we, 24th or something like that?
For now, I think we're probably still going down. I think really, I really appreciate what y'all are doing in this, because what I want the parents to hear, and I'm taking this to heart myself, is what do we have to do as parents? Because I get home tired from work, and I really don't feel like reading. I want to sit myself in front of my TV and veg out. I'd had to work 10, 12-hour days or whatever the case is. So what kind of tips can you give us as parents to still stay engaged, even if it's for 30 minutes after getting home from work?
I mean, it doesn't have to be when you get home from work. If you wake up at 6:30 in the morning and your child wakes up at 6:30 in the morning, that's a fine time to take 15, 20 minutes to read a book. And not even necessarily read a book. Small things, like I said, holding conversations weigh heavily on a child's life and when they go to school that day and how they feel that day. Asking simple questions goes a long, long way with students. So even if you are tired and you have worked 15, 10, 12 hours a day, it's the small things that students remember and kids remember because they're still at that young age where it's like these seeds are being planted in them. So having those conversations with them goes a long way. And then even on the weekends, finding time on the weekends to read the book or to do some math problems or to do some quick games, or asking the teacher to give you give me some flashcards that I can do with my kids 5 minutes of the day. Give me a quick game that I can play with my kids. And most teachers are very willing to give you those materials in order to see that student achievement, to see that success.
Same for you?
I think you're right about parents being really tired when they come home from work, because with the economy and the type of world we live in, more and more parents are working. Whereas, when I grew up, my mom was at home and my dad worked. And so we came home to home-cooked meals, and my mom had time. Being alone all day, she couldn't wait to talk to us when we got home, so she was that parent. But me, that I've always worked, and I've been a single mother, it is hard. You do get home tired. But, making your child read the cereal box, or making your child read billboards, or making your child read menus at restaurants, little things like that, I think kind of come a long way, too, because they might not want to read a book, because they've been reading books all day at school, too, so they want to do something different. Just getting them involved in any little thing.
I think that's a great segue or lead into the next section of the show. And before we go into that, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to discuss now the curriculum actually being taught on the campuses and what we should be looking for ourselves as parents, okay? So you're watching Latino Talk TV. We'll be right back. Okay, you're watching Latino Talk TV. We're back now with our two more guests. First, we have Miss Tracy Powell,
Right.
a reading specialist.
That's right.
Okay, and also Miss Janie Jimenez, another reading specialist. There, you can see her right there. Anyway, so let's get into the curriculum itself. What should parents be looking for on their campuses, and how can they, really get involved with the teachers for their kids?
Well, I think the biggest thing, there's a lot involved in the curriculum, and so I think the biggest thing for parents, and these girls have talked about it before, is just to take time to read with their kids every night. The curriculum is very involved, and there's very specific TEKS and student expectations from the state that kiddos have to learn in each grade level, and it can get very complicated, and I think that's mostly the teacher's job and their educators, but I think for sure if parents could just read with their kid, it is the number one thing that research says improves students' academics, is to read and read and read. And so I think that's the best thing that parents can do for their kids and with their kids every night.
And as a parent, you should always look at the take-home folder that a child brings home in elementary, because we are elementary. I don't know, I face you. They should look at their daily folder, because in the daily folder, that's the way a teacher communicates their conduct, their homework, assignments that they have. And even though they come home tired from work, you could spend 10 minutes before you go to bed and let's look over, did you do your work? Let's check your facts. Let's check your reading log. And then, of course, depending upon the school district, you either are in a 6-week period or a 9-week period. So when you want to look at report cards, look at the grades. If it's, 80s, yeah, that's passing, but is that what you want for your child, an average grade? You want to look at conduct, if it's, N needs improvement, U unsatisfactory. And then, call the teacher and have phone conferences. Some schools do home visits. We go out to the school, we go out to the home, see the environment, and look at how we can work together to help the child succeed.
You're talking a lot about reading with the children, taking a few minutes to read. We're used to reading books, but now so many kids are using iPads and computers and things like that. So what do you think about reading with your child a book through the iPad or
I think
internet?
Technology is just another way to get kids engaged. It's very engaging for kids. And so if you can get your kiddo maybe not to pick up a paper book, but to read on the iPad or on their e-reader, I think it's great. Whatever it takes, whatever we need to do for our kids to get them more engaged and excited about reading, I think that's great.
I made a point earlier about the technology, ladies, and it'd be, we're here as adults, but if a kid says that they're carrying a cell phone and they're in the 3rd grade and they say, well, we just ask Siri, or I'll just Google it, why do I need to know that? So what type of effect has technology played on knowing algebra or what have you? Why do I need to know that? I can just Google it.
I think Google is fine within context. We use Google a lot in my classroom for various subjects that I couldn't give them the exact answer for. I think a lot of it is, like we were saying earlier, having those conversations with your kids about when to use Google and when not to use it. And a lot of it comes from like parent and teacher relationships and like explicitly telling your students, this is what I expect from you. Like, learn the algebra because you need to go to college. Learn the algebra because this is what people are saying are happening to students in low-income communities. We want to make sure that we like beat those statistics and make it out. I think a lot of it has to deal with like context around like using technology. I'm a big fan of technology. We use it in class. We use it out of class. There's no way to not use technology these days.
It's a tool. So yes, you can use Google, but there's also magazines. Like when you're reading, yes, expose them to the iPad, to a Nook, to whatever you have, but you also want to show them a newspaper, which I know it's not that common, but that's another form of literacy. You want to show them magazines. And then when you're researching, you want to use the internet, but you also want to look at encyclopedia. You want to look at books, because that's what real people do. They pull information from all these different places.
I've also read in things that it's very good for your kids to also see you as a parent reading as well, and see you have enjoyment from reading. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah. Absolutely. Tons of research on, even as a teacher, just modeling reading for my kids. My kids always knew what I was reading. Maybe not in my adult life, but I'm always reading an adult book. I'm always reading a kid's book. So I know what to recommend. As a teacher, it's about finding a match for the kiddo, because I know if I can find that one book for that boy in my class who hates to read, I know that I have him hooked for life. And it really is about, just developing lifelong learners and lifelong readers. We know that those kiddos are going to be successful. So.
Well, what about children that may have speech impediments, what have you, and it affects their reading or what have you?
Well, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
We have like in my library at the campus that I work at, we have the e-readers. So there's a lot of novels, especially the popular novels, like the Hunger Games, or the new series that are out there that are the bestsellers. They have the e-readers where the book is read to them through like a little, not an iPod. Well, it looks like an iPod, and they use it the same way, and they love that.
Well, I love to read audiobooks all the time. That's the only way I read. I ain't gonna lie, I hate to read. The only thing I read is my Facebook and the newspaper online. But here, I want to ask something that y'all ain't gonna like, but that's okay. But y'all just keep putting it all back on the parents. But what if you actually get a teacher who's not worth the mustard? What do you do as a parent? Because there are teachers who aren't good. You know that. And it's hard to fire them.
You have to be an advocate for your child. I mean, I'm a parent as well, and so you're the only person that can speak up for your child, and you absolutely should. Because what we know about research is research says that 1 year of a bad teacher can affect your kiddo for the rest of their life. They may never catch up.
2 years behind, 3
2 years behind, and they could never catch up. And so it's important.
I feel that parents need to go to the schools and advocate and kind of, you know, express their concerns. And that's when red flags will start arising, and then the, you know, administration will start looking into that teacher. If no one complains, you know, that teacher can be on campus for years and years before someone, you know, so you know, now that I'm an administrator, as a school counselor, I want to hear feedback from parents. And so, you know, I'll go in that classroom. I'll do, like, you know, random checks on that classroom to see what's going on. That is the only way to, you know, combat the problem.
Should it be just verbal, or should they write a written complaint? I mean, what's the procedure?
I think a lot of us are speaking about like being advocates. So starting day one, just talking to the teacher initially and telling them like what you want for your child. This is what I want from my student. And a lot of times teachers like send home surveys or like, oh, what are your goals for your child this year? And I think a lot of times parents don't realize the power that they have in the classroom, and they have a lot of power in the classroom.
Or vice versa, they know they have a lot of power.
Yes,
What?
they do have
Yes.
a lot of power, and teachers have a lot of power. I mean, it's a powerful atmosphere, but making sure that you talk to the teacher and say, this is what I expect, or even like, what is my child doing this week? How are their grades this week? A lot of times we wait until that progress reports come out 6 weeks later, and it's too late. Then, like, you're already failing that first class. So making sure that you stay on the teacher from the very beginning is what I was saying.
I think what you said is very important. You know, if you feel like your child is maybe not getting the best education, I think you should always go to the teacher first. You know, rather than automatically going to the administration and just making assumptions. But I think certainly trying to work it out with the teacher first, and then if that doesn't work out, then going higher.
You know, you hear about parents that are purposely keeping their kids back a year to give them an edge on life later. I'm sure you've heard of that they purposely want their kids retained a year so that way that as they grow that they'll be bigger, a little bit more mature, and it kind of teaches them the leadership skills, if you would. Have you heard of that theory?
Yes, I have. I know some parents do that for sports reasons as well, so their kiddo, you know, can play certain sports, be bigger, and this and that. And I think my philosophy is that it's child by child basis. I believe that some kiddos need to be retained and other kids don't, and there's a lot of, you know, a lot of options or a lot of issues that you have to consider. Academics, socially, you have to think about, is the kiddo, you know, ready to move on? So I think we see that a lot and have to deal with that. And I think
They want to move them up because their birthday is like September 1st. So they want us to skip pre-K and put them right into kindergarten. I've seen that in a lot of cases, but they usually have a meeting with the principal to decide if they're going to move them forward.
So is that worth it?
I think it's a case by case because we have to think about their maturity. Size does play a factor. If they're small, what's going to happen? Maybe not right now when they're in elementary school, they're not going to deal with things, but what will happen when they get to junior high and their friends are this much taller than them, those are things to consider. I personally would wait as a parent.
I know that my brother, when he was young, he was very socially, you know, aware of everything and talked very well. And so because his birthday is August 20th, he's the baby of his class. So he's almost a whole year younger than everyone in his class. And in pre-K, kinder first, he was doing great. But as the years started going on, like around 3rd or 4th grade, we started noticing that he was getting behind. And so my mom has always wondered, you know, maybe he wasn't ready for school when I thought he was. And so he did fail a grade. I think it was 5th grade. And it had to do with because, you know, a year made a big difference. He was turning a certain age, and then by September, October, you know, all his classmates were turning a whole year older than him. So he literally was almost a whole year younger.
I think
and it catches up.
We see this with boys a lot too, their maturity level, and you know, research talks about, you know, boys maturing later than girls do, and so it's just, I think, a child by child basis.
I'm not going to say anything. There's 5 women right here.
I graduated when I was 17. I was always the youngest one. But yeah, I still hold some resentment for that.
So
My
the
older
biggest,
brother did too. He skipped a grade in 5th grade. He actually skipped a grade, but he had to take a maturity test to make sure that he would be suitable to go on to the next grade, and that made like a world of a difference. So I definitely agree when you say that it's like a case by case. So he graduated when he was 16.
Yeah, but it's hard because like when I was in high school, all my friends were 18. They were going clubbing already, and I couldn't go.
Okay.
I mean, that's really what it was about. It's like
Yeah.
I'm graduating high school, and my friends were going out, and I couldn't go. I was 17.
The cutoff date for the birthday seems to be a big issue with a lot of parents. Do you recommend that they push it for pre-K kinder, or do you recommend that it's something that maybe when they're in 5th or 6th grade they can try to test out once because they're older, they're a bit more mature? Or is it something that altogether you think they benefit from being the oldest kid in the class?
I think foundationally, pre-K and kindergarten are very, very important. That's where you get a lot of your social skills, your emotional skills, the basic reading, counting, and that kind of gives you advantage once you step into kindergarten and step into 1st grade, having that basic foundation. So I personally think that like going to pre-K is
It's a must.
Yeah, a must. It's
well,
very
what
important.
about the kids that are like in middle school where they're kind of in that, you know,
That transition.
yeah, in that transition, and it's real difficult, or maybe they didn't grow as much as the other kid in summer, or whatever the case may be, and you know, how do you address that? You just kind of on a case by case basis, or what?
So are you saying like they?
I'm elementary.
Are you saying like go
Well,
skip
you know,
to the next
dealing.
grade or?
No, I'm just saying dealing with them. You know, with everything that's going on, that's got to be difficult for you guys.
You just do it. Just do it. Like
The class clown, if you will.
It's about building relationships with your students. You know, me personally, I taught 8th grade for 5 years, so they're 13 years old. Some of my students are bigger than me, taller and bigger. And it's just developing relationships with your students. I get very attached to my students. I mean, you know, they're my kids. And at the end of the year, you know, wishing them off well to high school is really hard for me sometimes. And I would, you know, you get emotional. And so those students are the ones that they see that you really care about them. And so I think when students know you care, they will do a lot for you if they know that you respect them and that you care about them.
And you're a good teacher. So now, tell the parents what not to do. The don'ts. Don't. Y'all know those things that y'all don't like parents doing, so y'all quit trying to hide it.
It's really hard to tell parents what not to do because they get very defensive and they don't want to, they feel that you're being disrespectful. And then by no means are we doing that. We're trying to give them constructive feedback.
Great. So they won't call you in right now. They won't talk back. So
No?
if you
Okay.
had the chance to tell a parent, don't do this stuff, what would it be?
Talk to your child in complete sentences.
Okay, talk to your kids in complete sentences and quit munching up your words like I'm doing right now. What else? I'm being serious because this is the stuff that y'all think of every day. Y'all see this every day. All the stuff that y'all roll y'all's eyes at. I mean, y'all are teachers. Y'all are human beings. Because I do it in my job. We all do it in our careers.
I think just the way they speak to their kids, the language, you know, they use bad words, they cuss because they think they're cool. And they might not even be cussing to their kid, but they just use a lot of profanity in their everyday language, like on the phone or, you know, with their friends over. And kids are listening to that, and kids adapt to that.
Okay.
Monitoring, you know, what your kiddos watch on TV and knowing what your kids are watching on TV, I think is big. There's so many inappropriate shows out, you know, and it does affect kids, I think. And monitoring the amount of time they spend with the TV and getting them up and active and eating healthy, you know, making good food choices. All of these things affect the whole child.
I'm going to go there. Have respect about how you look. Because when you have respect about how you look, your child is going to have respect about how they look. So dress appropriately because you never know, even though you're just driving into the school to drop off your child, if you're going to have to go into the school to sign some papers or, oh, we need you to sign this permission slip or we forgot, would you come in for whatever reason, you never know if you're going to have to get off the car. So you want to make sure that you dress in clothes in which you would not, you know, that would be appropriate, that you would embarrass your child for coming out in. It's very important.
You know,
they
when we were
respect
little,
ourselves.
you touched it about respect. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Thank you. You're welcome. Are you seeing that?
If you build it in your classroom,
right.
you can see it. Like
Yeah.
that's based on the teacher. If you build that kind of culture in your classroom where respect is something that you value, then you will see yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, opening doors, waiting for the ladies to go out first. That was a big deal in my classroom. My boys would literally wait until all the girls went out of the door before they
Wow.
walked out of the door. They would hold the door for ladies. If you build it in your classroom, you can see it.
But this is something that you're having to teach, not something
Yes.
that the kids are
Absolutely.
coming in with already.
You're showing that
Some
they knew
students
this?
have it. Some have it. Not all, but
I mean, we as adults really have it the way that we're supposed to have it sometimes?
Do we?
No. So how do we convey that message to our kids if we don't always have it?
Okay, so it starts with us.
Starts with us.
It does start with the
What
teacher
about
in
the
the classroom.
economy? What type of effect has that had on kids and classrooms and all that? I mean, does it have an effect?
Absolutely. I think it has an effect on the way our kids perform day to day. Did they get in, did they eat that morning? How long has it been since they've eaten? What kind of, where's the family situation at? Where are they living? Do they have a place to live? Certainly all of those things play a factor of whether a kid learns that day or listens and hears you or not, if they're in survival mode.
Did you see that a lot in the campuses? Are there those kids that are struggling? Their parents are struggling? So what are some of the issues that you're running into now? I mean, homeless parents? I mean, kids without any food, something to eat?
Kids being unsupervised because parents are working 2 to 3 jobs and they're going home and taking care of their little brothers and sisters. So they come to school frustrated. They come to school and feel like they can't have a childhood. They can't participate in extracurricular activities. It's not even the money issue. It's just that they can't even stay after school because they have to go home and help their families. And so they start getting resentment. They start, that's when they start rebelling against their parents. And even their teachers, they come to school in a bad mood and they take it out on us teachers.
You see a lot of times where the parents themselves want to try to act like they're kids and not be a parent. And they're too worried about, like you said, hanging out where they shouldn't be hanging out instead of hanging out with the kids and what have you. The breakdown of the family structure, if you would.
So let's talk about the dress code, because every campus, every district is different. Do y'all believe in dress codes or not?
That's a slippery slope because I feel that dress code helps to some advantage because everybody looks the same. And so kids aren't like, oh, you have name brand, oh, you have this. But I know that this year our school district did change the dress code policy. It used to be like a certain color polo shirt only, and now it's any color. So I think they're making it a little bit more freedom so parents aren't just restricted to certain colors. And so, but they still have to have a collar. It has to be tucked in. They have to have a belt. They can't be wearing excessive baggy jeans. And so I think that comes into play with security, the baggy pants and stuff. So we're trying to avoid all that.
I think there's a healthy balance there. I like that our district as well is moving away from only red, white, or blue, but opening it up a little bit so kiddos can, express themselves in different ways. But I do like that it levels the playing field, for our kiddos who can't afford to go out and buy the cool clothes or, the clothes that they want to buy. So I think there's a balance when it comes to uniforms in schools.
I would say consistency is key. If we're going to have uniforms, then we need to be consistent with our uniforms and making sure that every student has the exact same thing. I'm not big on uniforms. I didn't go to school here in Texas. We didn't have uniforms when I was coming up, and so it's kind of new for me. But it does look good, and it brings a sense of like, this is who I am, this is my school, like I should be proud of my colors, and that type of way. But consistency is definitely key. If we're going to send home one student for not having on the right shirt, we need to send home all the students for not having on the right shirt.
Yes.
Not to veer off a little bit off subject here, but I have a question. Have you ever had or experienced a parent getting in the way of you doing your job? Does that happen often?
Don't worry, they're not watching.
What do you mean get in the way?
Well, sometimes parents are very, very protective of their kids, so they don't want you to say anything negative about them, or they come to you because you said they're having problems in school, and they don't want you to discipline their child, or they don't want you to say certain things, or just a parent that maybe is doing a little bit too much to not let you do your job to help them learn.
A parentzilla? Like a bridezilla?
What about the parents that actually tell their kids that they shouldn't go to college? that it's a waste of time for them to even go
Well,
excel to that.
I think that's a little bit different. We have to respect the parents because, I mean, they are the mother, father of our students. So I have experienced a case where a parent did not want me, to touch their child for whatever reason. It wasn't in an academic setting. It was when it was a dismissal time. And so I have to respect that parent, and I do not touch that child, or actually no teacher touches that child. So we do have to respect the parent wishes. As far as college, yes, we encourage college. I think most of our schools are geared that way because there's such a push to getting our kids college ready, that we, talk about the pros and cons and about the different ways to getting through college. And even high school now has different programs where you can get dual credit and get your high school credit as well as start getting your towards your associate degree, with community colleges and things like that. So, yeah.
I think, going back to what Tanisha said and has been saying about developing relationships with parents. I've had a parent cuss at me and, yell at me because they weren't happy, decision I made about their kiddo. It is just about me sitting and listening to that parent and making sure they know that they're being heard and they're being understood, and then talking it out and, coming to a consensus together and coming up with a plan together of how we're going to, for the betterment of the kiddo, because that's why we're here. And so I think every time it's always worked out. That whole relationship piece is key.
So speaking of relationships, so should Texas be English only?
No way.
Why not? I mean, look at the politics. Look at the news. It should be English only. Why not? Your teachers, I mean, our leadership says it should be English only.
I don't agree with that. My son's in dual language. The research behind having 2 languages is huge. Why wouldn't I provide that or give my kid that opportunity? I think every kiddo should have the opportunity to speak 2 languages if they want to.
Anybody else?
I don't think there's an official language for the United States, so I don't think there could be an official language for a state. Like, say, just all English. I think, you're going to have a lot of opposition to that if Texas would try to go to only English.
So what's better? You gonna say something?
I think people just need to realize the strengths that come with being bilingual in any facet. If our students knew how many opportunities they could have from being bilingual, then I don't think it would be too much of a debate. I think that the issue is that we don't know everything that you can do with being a bilingual student or speaking 3 languages or speaking 4 languages and the power that has. So I'm definitely an advocate of dual languages.
So is there a distinction between dual language and bilingual?
There's lots of different programs.
What's the difference between these programs? Because you hear bilingual, dual language, you hear all these things, and at the end of the day, all you see is a political campaign saying, I'm going to abolish bilingual education on the campuses. There are people who run political campaigns based solely on the fact of getting rid of those programs. What should parents do or think about when they see those types of things?
Once
Anybody?
again, be advocates. You have to be an advocate for your student and for yourself, and go to those meetings and do all that you can to
Talk
make
to
sure
your school board.
What is the deal with schools that they really don't look like the world looks? And it seems like we segregate ourselves by choice. And what happens, I think that the kids lose learning about different cultures. And then that creates problems later on as they grow up. Whether, and it seems to me that African American kids mainly go to this school, Hispanic kids mainly go to this school, Anglo kids mainly go to this school. And what happens, you're around people that look like you all day, you don't learn anything else about somebody else's culture. Do you see that?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we see that.
So how do you
I
address
don't
it?
see that in my district. We're pretty mixed. We used to have actually bilingual education in certain schools, but then our school board, we were busing lots of students, and so we moved back to having a bilingual program on every campus.
Well,
So
how
now
diverse is the teachers?
The teachers are
There
pretty
you go, right?
diverse.
What we need
Tanisha?
are more male
I like that. Okay,
educators.
she's saying no.
I totally agree. I think of it as institutionalized segregation. So
Yeah.
because of the communities in which we live, like you are
Exactly.
zoned, like not necessarily zoned, which is totally different from where I'm from, but this is the school in your community, so this is the school that you're going to go to. And everybody in the community looks like me. Everybody's going to go to this school. Which is like a big push when we talk about like low income and the achievement gap, and making sure like that is why there is essentially an achievement gap, is because we are like having all of our Hispanic kids in this community while our Anglo white students are in another community and getting a different education than what we're getting in these lower income communities. So a way to fix that is like building that culture in the classroom and talking about these things. And I think it is difficult for some teachers to have those conversations with their students about racism, about low income, about what's going on in their communities. But that's the only way to make them aware of like other cultures, of other races, other everything. So.
And that's why reading, you can do that through reading books. And I'm the reading specialist. But, you know, we can learn about so much through books, and it makes it easy to bring up, issues like that and have those discussions with the kids in the classroom, and we need to do that.
So I think what we're really hitting on is what's happening on in our country, where we're now socially, economically segregating ourselves. So the more money you have, you move into different neighborhoods. You know, the poorer you are, you're going to end up wherever you can afford a home. So based on that, you go to the school near your community. If everyone else is poor, then everyone on the campus is going to be poor, and the teacher deals with the same issues over and over again. So how can you integrate those without busing people around? Is that even possible?
Well, just because you live in a poor area doesn't mean that you're going to get a poor education, because it's the district's responsibility to train the teachers to, I'm going to use a teacher word, to differentiate or to change her method of teaching to meet the needs of those students. Because regardless, we're all responsible for those Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, the TEKS, TEKS, whatever you want to call it. So if we're in a poor school or we're in the rich school, we're all assessed by the same star, which we did not talk about, and that's like a whole show on its own.
Okay, but let's say you're the school board, right? It's diverse.
No,
and
it's not.
Well, hold on, wait a minute. Let me make my point. It's diverse, but
Yeah, right.
it depends on how strong that advocate, that trustee is for the district they represent, and how the monies are distributed. That has an effect there again back on the kids. And a lot of times it's all politics. Who gets the big contract to build the new schools? And who gets in all this? And who gives money and all that, right? So there again, the whole focus, what about the 1.8? Well, it started out at 1.8.
$1.9 billion bond.
At this
HISD.
time?
Everybody's broke. Y'all don't listen to HISD. Okay, we're talking money now. Y'all probably don't care about the money, right? Y'all don't care about money?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So teachers need a raise, right?
But does it trickle down to you?
I mean, yes.
Does it?
I think it depends on the district you're in.
Y'all are so nice.
I mean, I think ultimately teachers are there because they want to be. You are going to have a few that are bad apples. But I think ultimately, like you said, crazy hours and the pay, no one's a teacher to get rich. So I think teachers, honestly, the majority of them generally just love what they do.
Awesome. And I'm getting the finger, not that kind of finger. The one finger, 1 minute left on the show, that came out totally wrong. Sorry about that. But thank y'all so much for joining us today on this live show. We learned a lot, and thank you for taking time out of y'all's busy schedule before y'all get ready back on track. So thank you.
Read.
That's right.
Read.
For those of
and
you
be
out
involved.
there, read to your kids and get involved, and wear decent clothes when you go drop off your kids at school. So don't act crazy. But you're watching Latino Talk TV. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be here next week. Have a good night.